Hello, I'm Megan Cole, Teen Services Coordinator at the Powell River Public Library, and this is Let's Talk Books. It's a video series I've been doing during the library's closure, where I talk a little bit about the books that I've been reading, some of the ones I recommend that you add to your to-read list, and I also ask for those of you who are watching to share with me what you've been reading. And this week I'm actually going to share a little bit about what I've received in comments and emails about what people in the community are reading right now at home. So maybe I'll start there with some community recommendations. I printed them out and we'll read them out to you. If you are reading anything that you think we should know about, please let me know. I would love to share more of our community reads with you. So the first one I'm going to share with you comes from Wendy Toomey, who's a library regular. I know she's been missing the library a lot, so it was lovely to hear from her. She said she is reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, about his time in a concentration camp after hearing Michael Enright talk about it on CBC's Sunday morning. So she heard about this on the radio. Turned out she owned a copy, but has never read it, and she said it kind of provided some great context for what we're currently going through. Kirk Summers let us know that he's kind of been diving into some classics. So he's been reading Ulysses by James Joyce. He read Little Prince, which is one I read as a student. Only I was in French immersion and we called it Petit Prince. And he just started reading To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Gail Fennell, she also reached out to us and let us know that she just finished reading The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She said it had lots of good ideas on how to improve and create more happiness in your life. Brownie, who many of you probably know, she echoed my love for Rebecca Solnit and let me know that she just finished reading Rebecca Solnit's newest book of essays called Whose Story Is This? She's also reading a delightful book called Dinner with Lenny. Knowing nothing about music, Brownie says, but this interview with Leonard Bernstein was fascinating. She's now settling into Night and Day by Virginia Woolf, a bit of a Virginia Woolf theme going on. I also heard from Candace Parker, who said, I have to say that I really want to promote Lost Child Archive by Valeria Lucelli, which is described as a novel, but has a fascinating documentary structure. It is about two soundscape artists who are on a road trip from New York City to Arizona, New Mexico with their two children from prior relationships, told from the point of view of the mother and the oldest child mostly. The author is a polymath, quite young, and I really want to read her other books now. The last book that Candace read was Late Migrations, A Natural History of Love and Loss by Margaret Rankel. She describes it as a memoir dedicated to her extended family, told in short vignettes, with a keen attention to the natural environment around her Tennessee home and childhood Alabama home. Worth reading, beautifully illustrated by her brother. Like many of us, Candace is digging into her home library, and she somehow has 3 Jane Eyre novels she's never gotten around to reading, so she is now reading Jane Eyre's The Underpainter. So thank you so much to those of you who shared with us what you're reading. I hope more of you will do the same so I can share those on the video. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been reading. Last week I mentioned I was reading this book here, Paradise Built in Hell by Rebecca Solnit. I haven't finished this book yet because I'm reading it with a book club, and we're going to try and discuss it section by section. So I'm trying to move slowly through this book so I can keep up with the group. This is not how I normally read. I'm a fairly quick reader, so I decided I was going to pick up another book in the meantime. So while I've been waiting to discuss this book with my group, I've been revisiting a few books. This one here, Mistakes to Run With by Yasuko Tan, is a really incredible memoir. I'm revisiting this one, and also I also am revisiting In My Own Moccasins, a memoir of resilience by Helen Knott. Because I do a podcast as one of my many hats, where I talk to authors of the BC and Yukon Book Prizes shortlisted books, and so these two lovely authors are going to be upcoming episode guests. So I thought I should reread those books. I reread them, or I read them for the first time earlier this year. So I'm really enjoying revisiting those two. But the one that I'm really into right now, that I'm devouring, is this book here. It is called That Time I Loved You by Carianne Leung. This book came to me, I bought it after I attended the Vancouver Writers Festival. Carrianne was part of an event with authors like Shazia Hafiz Ramji and Lindsay Wong. And it was moderated by Dina Del Bucchia, who was part of our BC Writers series last year. And Carrianne read from this book, and I loved it right away. I loved what she read, so I thought I would buy it. But of course, as things go, it was on my to-read pile, and things got added to the to-read pile, and I would kind of move it up, and then it would get moved down. So I thought it was about time that I picked up this book, and I am so glad I did. The structure is that it is a fiction told in linked short stories. The whole book takes place in a neighborhood, a suburb in Scarborough, and it takes place in 1979 and around that time. And it's the lives of the people who live in this neighborhood. And the neighborhood is made up of all sorts of really fascinating characters and families and dynamics. There's immigrant families living here from Hong Kong, from Jamaica, and these families some of them are first generation immigrants, some are second generation, some are Canadian born families, and it's all their various interactions, and it is just really, really, really fascinating, beautifully told, and as the subtitle suggests, life is never as perfect as it seems. There's some dramatic intrigue as well. So I thought I would read a short story from here. I'm about 2 short stories from being finished this book, but I really, really love it and wanted to share it with you today. So I'm going to read from Treasure, which comes just about midway through the book. Marilyn was a thief. This was as true as her hair was auburn, now striped with gray, and she was tall. When she was younger, she would take this aspect of herself and hold it to the light like a marble and turn it over to examine it. She used to wonder why she was a thief, and when no answer seemed forthcoming, she would stop wondering. Marilyn was acutely aware of the thrill that thieving gave her from the first time she took a tube of lipstick from the purse of her beautiful best friend Lucille when she was 16. She remembered being fixated on the pink tube edged in gold. The color was called Lilac Memory. It was a ghastly shade on her friend, and yet Lucille treated the lipstick like it was a magical wand. Lucille was the kind of beautiful that the ugly lilac enhanced. It made people pause to look even longer at her and ponder, even with that clash of color, Lucille was a riotous beauty. Marilyn was, as she would be her entire life, merely a sidekick. Her friends were always the prettier, the funnier, the smarter, the more interesting, and when she was alone, no one noticed her at all, despite her height. Marilyn found that for weeks before she took the lipstick, she was always aware of where it was, painfully attentive to Lucille's careful application of the garish purple on her lips and the return of it to the purse's inside zippered pocket. Several times a day this act was repeated, and so were Marilyn's tense observations. When she finally reached into Lucille's purse and snatched the lipstick, the pounding of her heart, the sheen of sweat that glazed her body lightly, and even the sharpening of her vision were delicious, revelatory. She imagined it was as close to feeling like God as she ever could, and so she continued. There was always a touch of regret when people noticed what was missing. That first time, Marilyn chewed her nails to the quick as she watched her best friend tear apart her own bedroom in search of that favorite lipstick. The guilt was fleeting. Marilyn found that she was able to inhabit the excitement of the act again and again when she pulled the terrible purple across her own lips and cupped the weight of the tube in her hands. Besides, Lucille had more than enough going for her. She didn't need the lipstick too. The joy of the conquest and the reveling in her trove never let her down. She perhaps caused some momentary irritation, but real, permanent harm? Never. Some people had too much stuff anyways. Her pleasure, she reasoned, greatly outweighed the crime. Besides, Marilyn knew she was a very good person, and she worked harder to be one. Meanwhile, her collection of pilfered objects grew, and she stored them in hidden boxes under her bed. As one of the first people to move into the new subdivision, Marilyn tried to make an impression right away. When other people arrived, she made it her job to welcome them. Her husband, James, was her skinny shadow, following her around with a jovial smile to match hers, but with fewer words. Together, laden with paper plates of home-baked cookies wrapped in plastic, they would walk across the dirt lawns, not yet covered by turf. It was a contradiction, perhaps, given her predilections, but Marilyn thought of herself as a very generous person. She carried herself regally, not stooping her shoulders like other women her age. She was large, but not fat. Thick, she would say. She was a formidable figure, and the neighbors quickly succumbed to her sense of purpose and friendliness. When she and James introduced themselves to each household with the vivacity of teenage counselors on the first day of summer camp, her sharp eye caught all the details of the neighbors' belongings. And that is That Time I Loved You by Carianne Leung, which we do have a copy of at the library, so when we are open again, be sure to check that one out. And that is all for another video of Let's Talk Books. Like I said, if you are reading something and would like to share it with us, please feel free to comment on Facebook or send me an email at cole@prpl.ca. And until we meet again, take care and enjoy all those great books.